doll-like dress, holding a brown bear in her hand. It was a strange sight because, although she looked very young, it was clear that she should have been long over that kind of toy. "Annie, there's no helping it. Nobody but you can take the position. I know it's a little early, but Susan has been preparing you to take over for a long time already," May shouted. Annie held on to the bear tightly, and her legs were shaking up and down while also biting her fingernails. It was clear she was afraid. "You don't need to do any of the work. We can cover for that, but right now the third family needs someone to step up, so we'll have order," Firth agreed with his female companion. "It's not about being ready or not," Annie eventually replied in a shaky voice. "If I take that place, no, it's probably true for whoever takes the leader role. I'm afraid that whoever killed Mother will come after me." The two vampire knights didn't expect this, that they would ever need to convince someone to take the leader's position. To the normal vampire folk, it was a position they could only dream of, being in charge of an entire family, becoming one of the most respected members of their society. "If you just need a leader, then why can't one of you take the seat?" Annie crossed her arms and pouted. The two of them gulped when they thought of this. A shiver ran down them as they remembered Susan's body on that wall. "That's because we can't. We're knights after all. As her daughter, it's only right for you to succeed her," May eventually put together an explanation. Annie may have been naive, but she wasn't stupid. Although it was going against their etiquette, it wasn't exactly taboo either, especially in their current time, when the first family was being led by their former knight Kaz, and the council had even granted Silver special permission to take over as leader if anything was to happen to the 13th leader. It was practically guaranteed that as long as one of them would come forward, that due to the circumstances, their request to fill in would be granted. Yet neither one of them wanted to admit it once the idea of them actually taking over was placed. I'm scared out of my mind. I know what the right thing to do is, but I just can't," Annie cried out in defiance. "And so you should be," a voice said from... to have been born when I entered my sleep, but you might have already been born when all the other Punishers left this world. I am now unable to ask your mother these questions, so it falls on you," Arthur proclaimed as he came forward. "Does that mean he couldn't torture the information out of my mother?" Annie wondered, swallowing hard. Usually, leaders had pride. They wouldn't let fear take over, and they would rather die fighting than to submit to the one threatening their death. However, there was one exception to this rule: the Punisher who could make them experience unimaginable pain. I will answer whatever you want," Annie quickly conceded, hoping that Arthur would at least give her a quick and respectful death. Susan might have been too prideful and tried to fight back, but the young woman had no hopes of leaving the place alive now that she had seen who it was, so her best hope was for a quick and hopefully painless end. Around 500 years ago, when the last king took over, Bryce had gone out on an expedition with a few of the vampire leaders. "Do you know about this?" Annie nodded. "Great. I'm going to name a few of the old and current leaders, and I want you to tell me which of the leaders went on that expedition with Bryce." Arthur soon went over a list of names, starting with the leaders before naming vampire knights and those in the royal guard as well. Annie nodded to those who had gone with and shook her head to those that hadn't. Arthur didn't expect her to know the names of all the vampires, but one would have at least known the leaders who had left at the time. Thank you for cooperating so far. Now, as for the last name, Annie Topper. Arthur looked up from the list, staring at her with a hint of bloodlust. The tears were falling uncontrollably down her face. For a brief moment she considered lying, but the glaring eyes gave her the feeling that they would be able to see through it. Even more afraid of the consequences of angering the monster before her, she finally nodded. Thank you for telling me the truth. I doubt you have much to say on the matter, but you still need to be punished for your crimes. You're guilty of eliminating the Punishers and their families who only wanted to live a life away from the settlement, Arthur stated. When Annie heard Arthur speak, surprisingly his voice was soft, and she could tell that he was almost in pain, as if it was something he didn't want to do, but knew it was something he had to do. When she heard Arthur talking about the Punishers, her mind went back to that expedition. Although it was true that she did take part, at the time she had merely followed alongside her mother, barely helping her. Still, that was no excuse for the lives she did take that day. For your cooperation, you've earned a quick end, Arthur proclaimed next to her ear, already having shoved his hand through her heart, with it no longer beating. Now I have a list of who to go for, and every single one of these will receive a punishment, but I will savor the ones that are most guilty, Arthur thought, walking off. A lifeless body slumped behind him on the throne. This time it took a little while longer for the body to be discovered. For that day, 2 vampire knights, as well as the replacement leader, had gone missing. It wasn't until the vampires on cleaning duty had entered the castle that they spotted the massacre that had occurred, and immediately called for the others. The room had been left untouched. Entering the room before any of the others was King Bryce, followed by Tempest at his side. Looking at the scene, Bryce's blood was boiling with anger. This is my vampire settlement, and during my time as king he is doing this? If this continues, then the whole vampire settlement could be doomed. I will skewer him, twist his body, and drain the blood out from his bones, Bryce shouted in anger, turning around and breaking the door as he pushed it open. Flashy, Tempest noted, looking at the broken door and then turning his attention back to the room in front of him. Looking at the wall behind the throne, a bloody message had been left behind. I have a list of you all. Admit what was done to the people, or all of them will be punished. Once more, an emergency council meeting was abruptly called between the leaders. Barely any time had passed since the last. Even stranger was the fact that it had been called in the third castle, causing some of the leaders to question its importance. Some were complaining, thinking that the castle had come into some sort of disagreement as to who to select as their new leader, and now they were cast to vote. When the leaders arrived, they thought that they would head to the throne room, but instead they were led to one of the many dining rooms. The situation was getting odder by the second, and when they saw several royal guards standing outside, it didn't exactly clear things up for them. Muka had just arrived, and when he entered, he found the other leaders already discussing things amongst themselves, apart from Paul, who stood off on his own to the side, looking at the situation. What in the... Muka was staring at the blood message on the wall, and Annie's body, which had at one point fallen to the floor, with nobody having bothered to pick her up. It might have been the first time in vampire history that the third family had suffered so much in such a short time frame. The king apologizes for being unable to attend this meeting, Royal Knight Kyle announced. However, His Majesty has tasked me to deliver a message on his behalf based on what you see around you. The message is as follows. If any of you have doubted it, see for yourself what the Punisher has done. He has taken yet another life right from underneath our noses. His message on the wall is a clear sign that he wishes to challenge us all, a promise that he will be coming for us all. Not only us, but our children as well. Only he knows how far he will go. We have to put a stop to him now, or he will attempt to get rid of every vampire in the settlement. The majority of those attending clearly agreed with that statement. Annie hadn't even been officially made the third leader, yet she had met such a cruel end. However, not all of them were shocked and in fear as they tried to figure out just what was going on. If this really is Arthur's doing, why did he target the third family twice? Luca wondered. Could there really be something Annie knew that Susan didn't? No, that should be impossible. She was practically a shut-in. Still, this time he left us a message, telling us about him having a list. Did he intend to start with all those from the third family and move on from there? It wasn't really a meeting. The leaders were talking with each other freely, but with no real agenda set up and the king absent. The other leaders eventually left the place not long after the royal knights had excused themselves, some walking in more of a hurry than others. However, a few of the leaders had decided to stay to take a closer look at the murder scene. Aside from Muka, there was Sunny and Jin. Similar to last time, the room had no signs of struggles or fighting in it. There was the broken door, but it looked as if the guards were already in the middle of repairing it, while having left the rest of the scene untouched, making Muka think it was someone else's doing. It looked like apart from the message, their only clue was the dead body. "Does anyone else find it strange?" Sunny asked. "The way Susan was killed by Arthur? When we look at Susan's death, it was a clear fear tactic statement, and you could say this is the same again, but this message here was clearly left behind for us, while the first had been for the public to see." "Does that really matter?" Jin questioned, unable to see Sunny's point. "Perhaps Arthur had hoped for a certain outcome after Susan's death, but with us not reacting how he wanted, this time he left behind a clearer message?" Jin walked up to the wall and looked over the message, as if hoping it would reveal some sort of secret underneath. "Or whoever these people are that he is annoyed. This list of his, and the words after. I'm sure you've noticed it. Some of the other leaders are afraid, more shaken up by this than us. Surely they know something that we don't. Maybe Arthur wants them to tell the whole settlement what they did." Sunny stood up and walked up to the blood message on the wall, standing by Jin's side. "I think we all knew that from the beginning. Have you ever thought about how Bryce managed to get so many votes for himself? The ones frightened were the same ones who he had wrapped around his finger since day one," Sunny pointed out, while she started to sniff the wall. Her nose was far more sensitive than her companion's. "You're missing my point. Look at the bodies as well. This time it was a single strike through the heart, a rather painless death. Now think back to how Susan was killed. Only one of those completely disrespects the deceased's body. To top things off, the blood on this wall smells slightly different from Annie's blood." He understood that things were strange. Otherwise, Jin wouldn't have stayed behind in the first place to see if there was anything he could find. But he thought that Sunny was perhaps trying to grasp at straws. When dealing with murder and revenge, people couldn't really be expected to stay reasonable with their actions or thoughts. "No, you're not the only one that thinks Susan's death was out of the ordinary," Muka stated, answering her first question. "This blood," Sunny murmured to herself, closing her eyes so her senses were better. "I've never smelt blood quite like what's on the wall, but there is one thing I'm sure about. It's not Annie's. If that's the case, then maybe this message was written in Arthur's own blood. I sense pain through his actions, someone who doesn't even like what he's doing. However, the first body was different. You're right, Jin. Perhaps they are the same actions of the same person, but if that is so, then the person would be in two different states of mind." At the 10th castle, before the meeting had been called for the vampires' leaders to attend again, Paul was busy sending off both Aaron and Leo. The teleporter could be activated by him once he got in touch with Logan. Then, when turned on at the other end, they could go through safely. "I hope you're able to contain the chaos so there won't be too much for us to do when we come back. I'm getting old," Leo said with a smile. "You may be blind, but you should at least know that I am the same age as you. Besides, what does age matter to us now?" Paul joked, both aware that their bodies felt stronger than they had done even back in their prime. After stepping through the teleporter, Aaron and Leo found themselves in the familiar metal and white room. They both knew that they were finally back on the cursed ship. It felt like it had been an exceptionally long time, for Aaron at least. "Every time I leave this place, I think it's only going to be for a short while, but it always ends up being longer," Aaron realized with a slight grimace. As for the one to greet them on the other side, it was none other than Sam.
None other.
He knew how much the two meant to Quinn, so he couldn't just send anyone to see how they were doing. "I'm glad to find both of you in great health. Honestly, I was half expecting one of you to come back with a missing arm or leg of some sort. Paul told me that you would eventually return to the vampire world. Unfortunately, Quinn isn't here at the moment, but the rest of the gang is. It would be nice if you both stopped by and talked to them. I'm sure you have a lot to chat about. I guess you haven't seen the video either." "What video?" Aaron asked, confused. The video Sam was talking about was the one that nearly everyone had seen. Of course, in the middle of the woods fighting, Leo and Aaron had no clue what Quinn and the others had been through during their time away. "I guess we do have a lot of catching up to do. What brings you here anyway?" Sam asked. "Weapons," Leo answered. "We were hoping to meet up with Alex and get him to forge a few new weapons for us. Ours might..." we are about to face. Hearing this, Sam had the biggest grin possible on his face. Well, I was going to save this for later, but Quinn did leave me something in case he would return. I'm sure you will greatly appreciate his little gift.
Episode 1. Life Spirit. In this world, strength is everything. Those with power soar through the clouds, looking down upon the weak. Fighting spirit is the inborn talent of the Book of the Way. Warriors can train their bodies to the peak of physical strength, but to gain real power, one must awaken a fighting spirit from the world beyond. Each
Ôi, 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 ôi.